Let's turn now to another major story in this country. An investigation is underway after a threatening email was sent to Jewish organizations across Canada. RCMP and other police services in Ottawa, Montreal, and Toronto have confirmed to CBC that they have been made aware of the threat. It was sent around 5 o'clock this morning. In Montreal, the Hempstead synagogue was among the places targeted. The email said that bombs had been placed in the building. RCMP are still trying to determine if it's a foreign actor or not. Benai Brith says it and 100 other institutions, including synagogues, received bomb threats. For more on this, let's bring in Anthony Housefather. He is special advisor to the federal government on Jewish community relations and anti-Semitism. He is also a Quebec Liberal Party MP representing the riding of Mount Royal. He joins us from Montreal. Good to speak with you.
Likewise, thank you.
So first of all, obviously, let me get your reaction here. What ran through your mind when you heard about so many Jewish institutions across Canada being targeted by threats today?
Unfortunately, it's not in the least bit surprising. It seems like every day there's a new anti-Semitic type of incident that occurs. These types of threats are unfortunately not new. Since October the 7th of last year, they have just come more and more frequently. Jews make up about 1.2% of Canada's population. More than 50% of hate crimes are against Jews in most jurisdictions these days. Over 70% of religious-based hate crimes in many jurisdictions. And unfortunately, we're getting quite used to this.
A synagogue in your own riding received threats via email. What have community members been telling you about how it makes them feel?
So ultimately, there were many synagogues in my riding that actually received these threats. The first one that I heard about was the Adapt Israel. That was the first one reported. I spoke to the rabbi. The congregation was evacuated earlier this morning. They then, did a sweep of the building. They found nothing there. People went back in. They've also benefited from the federal security infrastructure program to improve security at the building. And in the end, throughout Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, BC, the other institutions that were targeted by the email, nothing was found. I spoke to the public safety ministry right away to make sure the RCMP was coordinating with local police. They are, and hopefully we'll find and catch the person and charge the person who did this.
That's what I wanted to actually ask you about, because I certainly have read some press releases from RCMP and from local police saying that they have gone to the various buildings that have been under threat and ensured that there was no danger there, and as you say, have not to this point found any. But what about the investigation beyond that? Because it's one thing to have the threat, finding out who might be responsible. What hopes do you have that that could be achieved?
I mean, again, we don't know. The IP address could be from out of the country. We don't know who did this, but I assume that RCMP is taking this very seriously. This is what I've been told. They are working with their local law enforcement partners, and given the scope of what happened today, I think that this is something where we're going to want to see somebody caught and prosecuted, whoever was responsible. And I think that there's been a general sense of frustration within the Jewish community over recent months when we feel laws are broken, and yet we don't see prosecutions. And it is very important for people to see that the law is being enforced equally for everybody. And whether it's hate speech or whether it's threats or intimidation, the law has to be followed.
Back in July, you became the federal government's special advisor on Jewish community relations and anti-Semitism. Can you talk to us about what it's been like to step into that role during a time of such heightened tensions?
I mean, I have a community that has been incredibly frustrated by what they've seen as a lack of action by all governments. This is true not only in Canada, but across the Western world, where anti-Semitism has dramatically increased. And yet governments haven't stepped up to the Jewish community satisfaction. One of the things that I've been working on very closely with Deborah Lyons, who's our special envoy on anti-Semitism, is a safe return to campus. One of the worst places last year to be a Jewish Canadian was at our university campus, where there were encampments, there were threats against Jewish students, there was abuse of classroom pulpits, and Jewish students, many of them left very, very scared at the end of the year. We work closely with University Canada, with U15, with Jewish institutions like Bris Sija and Simon Wiesenthal, and universities themselves to come out with a list of what we think universities need to do for a safe return to campus in September. We put out that letter last week. We're counting on a positive response from colleges and universities across the country. And this is what needs to be seen. The Jewish community doesn't just want words, they want actions. We're taking action at the university level, even though it's provincial jurisdiction. We're working with the public safety minister on things like making Samadoun recognized as a terrorist organization, like having better prosecution of hate crimes, like having improvements to the criminal code, on bubble legislation to protect entrance to and exit from community buildings. And I just tried to make sure that the community sees that it's action, not just words.
Now, you have clashed with other members of the Liberal Party in the past over their stances on the issues surrounding the war. Has the government, do you think now at this point, done enough to combat anti-Semitism?
We've never done enough, but we're taking this very seriously. The Prime Minister naming me put this to be a top priority issue. And I'm working with ministries, the Justice Ministry, the Public Safety Ministry, the PMO, Heritage Canada, to try my best on all of the different issues that concern the community, to deal with the issues, and not just on anti-Semitism, but on issues like kosher slaughter. That has been a major issue where there's been a problem with CFIA guidelines. We're working really hard to make sure the Jewish community across Canada is aware that this is a priority. And it's true that I have clashed with other Liberal members on what's happening in the Middle East. We have different viewpoints on a conflict across the world. But when it comes to domestic issues like anti-Semitism, anti-Christian hate, Islamophobia, anti-Black racism, anti-gay issues, I don't think Liberal caucus members are divided on wanting to stamp out hate in Canada. And I've seen nothing but allies in the fight against anti-Semitism in Canada.
So we've seen the rise of anti-Semitism coincide with the October 7th and the war in the Middle East. Are you hopeful that if there is a ceasefire agreement that I don't want to say goes away, but that it lessens, that it becomes, that there is relief for the community in Canada as a result?
I think we all want peace in the Middle East. We all want Hamas to lay down their arms and surrender, and the hostages to be returned, and people to stop dying everywhere. But truthfully, I hope it does diminish anti-Semitism in Canada, but anti-Semitism in Canada, of course, should never be triggered by a war across the world. Jewish Canadians are not responsible for the actions of Israel in the same way that Arab Canadians and Muslim Canadians are not responsible for the actions of Hamas. And so to justify hate in Canada based on the war across the world, it shows a real problem if the war across the world is triggering hate here. So I hope, for whatever the reasons, we see a decline in hate, and I'm doing my best to make that happen, particularly with respect to what I've been charged with, which is dealing with hate against the Jewish community.
Anthony Housefather, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a real wonderful day.
Anthony Housefather is a Liberal MP and Special Advisor to the federal government on Jewish community relations and anti-Semitism.